so there's enough time for everyone to join. Before we begin, my colleague is going to be answering your questions in the chat, so if you have any along the way, please feel free to shoot them there. Let's start. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a lovely Wednesday. I'm very glad you found some time to join us today on the webinar, and let's get straight to it. I will begin with saying that yes, the topic of visuals and reporting is widely discussed, but there are aspects that are being barely mentioned. Nonetheless, they're very important, and making mistakes in communication, even the smallest ones, can reduce the impact of even the strongest research. So today I will look into some of the common mistakes and explain how they can be fixed. And before we get into that, I will give a very quick overview about our company for those of you who are not familiar with us. So, Les Things, we originally started in France. We develop software for research that will be with you at all the stages, from the first designed question to the last presented insight. That's how I like to phrase it. In the past 35 years already, we expanded globally. Now we have presence in over 50 countries with more than 50,000 users trusting in us. Quickly, about Listing software. At the heart of our ecosystem is our survey creation tool, IQ3. It gives you all what is needed to create complex studies with advanced logics. You can create surveys from scratch all by yourself. You can use AI assistants. You can import already existing questionnaires and then adjust them. You can also adjust responsiveness and languages. Moving on to the second step, once the survey is ready, you can choose to distribute it online with us or do it offline. You can connect it to panels or create your own community with Sphinx Community. You can also incorporate CRM systems and other informational systems, after which comes the next step, the third, the data management. You can use our tools to remove incomplete questionnaires, detect duplicates, identify some systematic and incoherent responses, as well as create calculated variables. And moving on to quantitative and qualitative analysis, we offer a wide range of statistical analysis, starting with a simple like univariate, bivariate, then linear regressions, factorial correspondence, also clustering techniques to help you identify some distinct profiles, as well as textual analysis. You can create code books. You can do it yourself manually if you prefer, or speed it up using AI. As well as dictionaries. You can generate word clouds, analyze expressions and themes, etc. And lastly, the conducted analysis can be turned into fully customizable dashboards, infographics, and reports. They can all be aligned to your customer's branding and all the needs. Today, I will not demonstrate the tools. The session is focused on methodology. But if you would like to see more of our tools, you can check out our website. We have plenty of videos and tutorials there, or just feel free to reach out to us. We can set up a live demonstration one-on-one for your team. Now, in my presentation today, I will explore 3 essential aspects that can significantly improve the way your findings are reported and ultimately strengthen the entire research process as a whole. The first one is identifying needs. It seems quite straightforward, but at times, trust me, isn't. The second one is understanding the expectations of target audiences. This is a very important one because not all who are going to review the information have the same focus or expectations. At all times, it's not even similar. And it's crucial to identify them and cater specifically to them. Well, and lastly, how to adapt the deliverables. Now, let's start with the first one. What we see happen quite a bit, not only with users and clients of Les Things, but in the industry in general. It's this conscious or unconscious belief that the actual work starts after the data is gathered, and that, to be honest, could not be further from the truth. In reality, the way you choose to communicate from the start needs to be based on the goals and the needs. Again, maybe it sounds a bit straightforward, but we see a lot of mistakes happen when the questions are not formulated in a way that reflects the actual interests of the study, or at times questions that don't even make much sense for this particular research at all. So what we need to begin with is finding out to the T, what does the client actually require to know, how detailed and why. Do they need to explore insights, or maybe make decisions, or monitor performance, or communicate the results to other people? Maybe prioritize action. Such an approach would ensure that you only ask the questions that are actually of interest and do not end up cluttering the survey. There are normally two types of needs. First one is focused on optimizing customer experience, which means we need a questionnaire that allows to in detail understand the strengths and the weaknesses, which later will be used to drive decisions. And the second one is highlighting the company's focus and approach. This requires working on brand image and using the results to then publicly share it later. So before choosing the format, two questions need to be answered. What is the objective of the communication? Is it operational, strategic, reputational? And the second one, who will use this information and for which purpose? Even if the KPIs in the company are the same, different stakeholders require very different levels of interpretation. For example, an SEO does not, the CEO, sorry, does not need the same level of detail as a store manager. And a customer experience specialist doesn't look for the same information as a customer experience supervisor, for example. And the first step, therefore, is to map the different audiences. Beginning with the first audience is experts. These people are usually highly involved in the study from the very beginning, and they take part in the implementation as well. Well, who are they? They're usually the customer experience management, the quality management, product innovation management, marketing management, etc. Although their roles may differ, they share one objective: is customizing and optimizing customer experience and understanding the why behind the results. For experts, knowing that the satisfaction is a, 7.8 out of 10, or that the NPS score dropped is just not enough. They need to understand what drives the results, where's the highest friction, exactly what problems occur for which customer segment, and what should be prioritized. Therefore, they need data to be easily explored, and there should be an opportunity to delve deeper into the details. Here I will use this retail example. If we only measure satisfaction with those 5 attributes on the screen and just stop there, we are falling really short in our analysis for this type of audience. When we identify improvement areas, it's not enough to just look at the lowest rated attribute or the worst score, because some poorly rated elements may have actually very little impact on the overall experience. Meanwhile, others with sort of acceptable scores may actually strongly affect it. For example, the design of a store that we own is not very appealing, not the nicest store. But perhaps the real driver of the satisfaction is the speed of the checkout. So a simple graph like this wouldn't be enough. We need to delve deeper and see the relationship and the impact of each attribute on the overall satisfaction. Here I will quickly go into the things that, well, a seasoned professional is most likely well familiar with. And of course, we don't intend to give you a market research lesson, but today's audience is quite diverse. Some are more junior and others are coming from a bit different industries. So I think it's important to establish, but I will try to be quick. What's important to mention here is that correlation is not the same thing as causation. This is very important. Two variables can evolve together without one actually causing the other. For example, customers who rate hotel cleanliness may also give, like, they like the hotel cleanliness, but they also might give a higher NPS score. But that does not necessarily mean that a good cleanliness level alone causes their recommendation. Those same customers might have received better service, stayed in a better room, experienced less issues, or just the weather was better that day. So the only thing that this would indicate is a statistical relationship. It doesn't demonstrate the cause and the effect. Correlations are very useful for detecting some interesting patterns, generating hypotheses, guiding some further analysis in the future. But if we end up only analyzing correlations, we may find that many variables seem very important. And there arises a risk of not knowing what is exactly having the most weight. Therefore, we need to go a step further and use regression. It allows us to analyze several aspects simultaneously to see which ones best explain the overall satisfaction. This is important because, of course, in the real world, the variables, they don't act in isolation. They are all interconnected with each other, and regression helps estimate the weight of each variable when we consider them all together. Now, I won't go into which regression to use because then this would just be a statistics lesson. But I'm saying all this so that you can see the importance of delving deeper to get the information the experts will ask for, the information that will be truly useful for taking a decisive action. Now, another aspect that we must consider for this audience is segmentation, as it allows us to identify different needs among profiles. Segmentation doesn't mean just filtering by gender or age. The most interesting segmentations are usually related to the customer journey and the buying behavior. This could be purchase frequency, customer tenure, the channels used, the spending level. Two customers may give the same overall score, but for two completely different reasons. To look into profiles deeper, we will go with statistical segmentation and with clustering, where algorithms will detect the profiles with some similar behavior and perception. I won't go into this deeper. I will just summarize. If you're, for example, doing a brand positioning study for cola and you present results to the head marketing, you will delve into all what I just had mentioned and maybe even more. But when you are asked to report those same findings to the CEO, different KPIs would come to play. Talking of CEOs, our next audience is decision makers. Well, this is quite obvious here. Who they are is the CEOs, the executive committees, the general management, the strategic leadership teams. Their role is to make strategic choices and allocate resources. So their main need is prioritization. They don't need the details and the whys like the previous audience. They need to quickly understand what is happening, why it matters, what are the risks, and what should be prioritized. Therefore, they need support that would synthesize the context and the customer problem at stake. The executives most likely weren't involved in the operational details. They didn't design the questionnaire, they didn't conduct the analysis, they didn't review all the variables, but they rather need to know in general what has been measured, about whom, and then what has changed and what the main problem is. For example, instead of showing 25 different satisfaction variables, you can show 3 dimensions with the greatest impact, two most deteriorating areas and a segment with the highest risk, for example. What I'm trying to get to here is that the main role of the researcher here is to help the company identify priorities going beyond just simply explaining what's happening and what has been found. A decision maker needs to understand what impact does this have on the business and what will happen if they don't act. That is why when we work on the deliverables for management, it's important to sort of translate it to the business language. The problem isn't the amount of information per se, it's more the clarity. For example, just mentioning that the satisfaction with technical support has decreased by 1 point will most likely be unproductive. You also have to explain why this is happening. So going with customers who rate technical support poorly are 3 times more likely to churn, will be giving them that valuable info in their language. Now, the second example has a bit of context. Imagine we conducted a study, we found there's a low NPS score, there's a greater decline among returning customers. It's more noticeable in orders that have delivery times longer than 48 hours. And lastly, there are comments that express frustration due to lack of information. So just having the NPS for online orders decreased last month isn't going to cut it for a decision maker. What we should provide is a conclusion that you can draw from putting all of this together. For example, the logistics experience for standard delivery orders is reducing customer loyalty among returning customers due to a lack of information. Maybe this is a bit of a long sentence that could be shortened into two, but you get the point. This is a lot more valuable when it comes to information. Now, next one is operational teams. Operational teams are responsible for the execution. Who are they? They are all profiles in a direct contact with an end customer of the service or the product. They are customer service agents. There may be branch managers, etc. The expectations here are highly pragmatic. They don't necessarily need to understand the why behind all the insights, but instead they mainly need clear instructions and an understanding how to monitor the progress. So how would you approach them? Well, beginning with contextualized information, one error would be just flooding operational teams with overly global metrics. Company-wide NPS score, national averages, things like that. They don't need as much the big numbers as they need the local relevance. What happens in their store with their customers on their daily basis. They could really use comparisons with nearby locations, local dissatisfaction drivers, and some clear performance objectives. Now, speaking actions, the closer the KPI is to a concrete action, the more useful it becomes. Instead of just stating that customer support is poorly rated, provide some more actionable insights, like which call types generate more dissatisfaction, when the detractors happen the most, what operational threshold actually matters. An example would be, instead of stating that satisfaction with waiting time has dropped by 2 points, go for customers rate waiting times negatively for calls lasting longer than 5 minutes. Then actions to be taken: 1, reduce response time to 3 minutes, and 2, inform the customer about the expected waiting time. Now, what is also important is prioritizing information. Too many dashboards like here, well, they will fail because just everything feels important. It is best to focus on 2-3 key priorities, critical indicators, and immediate alerts. Lastly here, Operational teams really benefit from seeing the impact of their work. So it's important to connect all actions to some sort of measurable outcome. An example would be, since implementing the new return process, the satisfaction has raised by X points. Or stores that apply a new protocol have fewer detractors. To enhance this, you could also add verbatims, real customers, some comments. It could be extremely powerful to the operational audiences because it humanizes the data. It doesn't feel anymore like just something that came from the top. Now, general public would include everyone the organization wants to communicate with globally, like employees, customers, prospects, users, institutions, etc. We will divide them into two groups, but overall, when we talk about the general public, we're not necessarily talking about research professionals or people accustomed to reading complex dashboards and information. Therefore, the main objective for this type of communication is not to delve into the analysis, but the objective is engagement, communication, reputation, and most importantly, trust. Beginning with internal, here the goal is not, as I mentioned, to analyze, decide, or manage indicators. The goal is to engage. For internal audiences, emotion and identification are usually more important because we seek to raise awareness, generate a customer-centric culture, maybe make it easier to mobilize teams. A very common mistake, like in a visual here, is that many companies reuse the same management PowerPoint or the same analytical dashboard for internal communications as well. And that usually doesn't work well because there's just too much information, too much complexity, and not enough storytelling. Therefore, we suggest going with something more visual and, most importantly, something that tells a story. How we recommend to structure the narrative for internal general public. First, what did the customer tell us? That's the perceptions, the trends, the real customer comments. Then, well, I opened them all, but what needs improvement is the second one. Here, keep the issues concrete and understandable. Instead of saying logistic satisfaction is low, say many customers mention lack of information during delivery waiting times. What actions are being implemented? The third one. Here it's about action plans and strategies. And lastly, probably most importantly, if communication only highlights problems that employees experience, it will bring fatigue, helplessness, frustration. Communication should also show the solutions, the decisions, the improvements. Now, moving on to external, these are people who don't even expect results per se and don't even know pretty much the internal processes that are going on in the company. Here, it's not like with internal audiences where you want to raise awareness and mobilize. Rather, the goal is to build perception, to communicate, to generate trust, and to add value. And this is why communication here must be even simpler, more narrative, more visual, and much more selective. They need to quickly understand what the organization is doing and why it affects and benefits them. Okay. What would be the most productive for this type of audience is selecting a few key indicators. Similarly to internal, external public doesn't need the reused dashboards and the infographics, all that. They need only a few data points. It has to be very clear, easy to interpret, and connected to the message. So I suggest choosing one main message, maximum of 2-3 key indicators, and 1 or 2 key takeaways. Value listening. Many organizations conduct surveys, but then the customer never hears from them again. And that generates a very negative feeling, sort of, they ask for feedback, but it's useless anyways. What would be very powerful here is simply closing this loop. For example, thanking participants, sharing a lesson learned, explaining what has been identified, and mentioning that actions will be implemented. Then strengthen trust and reputation. External communications work much better when they acknowledge the lessons learned, show the progress, and convey authenticity in a way. For example, that you can see on the screen, a bad idea would be to just go with 95% of our customers are satisfied. That these days creates little credibility, and going with something like our clients especially value the speed of service, but they have also pointed out difficulties in tracking incidents. We are already working on this. This sounds a lot more appealing. Next one is mobilizing external stakeholders. There is a type of results communication that is often underestimated, which can have actually a huge impact, using studies not only to inform, but to also mobilize the different stakeholders around the common problem, because many experiences do not depend on a single service or a single team or even a single organization. The user experience is usually built through multiple touch points. And when the problems arise, there's often no single entity that can solve them alone. For example, tourism would be nice here. The experience of the person visiting a city or a hotel doesn't solely depend on the accommodation and the activities. It also depends on the transportation, on the restaurants, etc. Now, to finalize, let's look into the third part, the presenting of the results. Now that we clearly understand the needs of different audiences, well, I hope, the needs for their approach and level of information, now we need to define which types of deliverables are most suitable for a different scenario. Starting with, what is the ultimate goal? Is it to explore? Is it to decide, to monitor, or when highlighting the company's approach, to inform? We will begin with a detailed report. The study report is probably the most comprehensive deliverable and the one that allows for the deepest understanding of the results. It is intended mostly for an expert audience that needs to explore customer feedback in order to optimize the results and after later guide certain decision making. I won't go into this too much. I believe you all understand what a research report allows you to do and for who. But there is something important here. A good report isn't about putting all the graphs just one after another, because just having a lot of information doesn't necessarily mean a better and deeper understanding. The true objective of the report is to help explore, to help identify patterns, to help contextualize, and transform data into understanding. A report shouldn't just answer what results have been obtained. It should help answer what is happening, why, for whom, since when, what is changing, etc. Let's quickly look into some of the main functions of the report. A first major function is to work by levels of reading. Here I will just skim fast. Level 1 is key takeaways, which is like 3-4 key insights. Level 2 is explanatory analysis. That is where the segmentations, the drivers, the comparisons come into play. And level 3, the exploratory detail. Here is the full results, the tables, all the data. The second major function is to explain relationships and not just isolated results. Third function is to detect weak signals, because often the value of the report lies not in confirming the known problems, it lies in detecting some small new developments, some emerging tensions, some changes in perception, some new expectations, or something like that. Fourth function, it should also allow for the discovery of some unexpected things. A report shouldn't only answer the anticipated question, but it can mention some unforeseen correlations, some anomalies, contradictions. Lastly, the report shouldn't give this false sense of absolute certainty. It can, of course, also point out hypotheses, limitations, points to explore, or even just mention inconclusive results. So, an example here would be an importance performance matrix, but I won't go into this to not waste much time. And also here the k-means and turning results into more actionable insights. Now, a deliverable that can be interesting here to present too is a strategic summary or executive summary. It is normally meant for a specific audience that needs to make decisions based on the concise analysis and the recommendations. Occasionally, some confuse it with a report but shorter. And here's the key idea. A report helps you understand, and a strategic summary helps you decide. Because the problem often isn't the lack of data, it's that the decision maker doesn't have the time to explore and interpret, to cross-reference the information and establish priorities themselves. And this changes the level of detail in which we present the information, as well as the structure and the writing style. Here, we also advise when creating the result summary, also adding the strategic balance and the actionable recommendations in order to have a higher impact. Moving on to the next one, the dashboard. We also often see reports that resemble dashboards or dashboards that are actually poorly converted reports. This severely lowers effectiveness because although both do display data, they don't serve the same purpose. A report helps, again, as I said, understand the situation, and the dashboard helps monitor the evolution, detect anomalies, compare performance, and react quickly when it's needed. Dashboards are not linear. Users just enter, filter, compare, leave, monitor, and then go away. Best practices for dashboards would be the following four. First one, show only useful and actionable indicators. Clearly, too much information makes what's actually important sort of get lost. Second one is allowing for quick detection of anomalies or trends. The reading should be immediate. The user should be able to identify just in a couple seconds what's improving, what's getting worse, what's off target, which segment needs some more attention. Next one is adapting to the user and their needs, of course. And lastly, contextualizing the indicators. An isolated KPI means nothing, pretty much, just saying an NPS score of 25 I mean, it can be good or bad, depending on the historical data, on the sector, on the objective, and the segment. This why it's important to accompany all the indicators with some sort of comparisons, objectives, benchmarks, etc. Here is an example of a dashboard taking into the account the evolution, or also with comparisons here. Now, the newsletter or an e-letter is rather unique among all the other deliverables. It doesn't have the depth of the report or the continuous monitoring logic of a dashboard. Its main function is different. It's to keep the topic alive in the team's daily work. Because one of the biggest problems with many studies is that they're presented once, they're discussed for a few days, and then they completely disappear. As long as they're not involved in the organization's routine. The newsletter allows you to avoid precisely that because the customer sees this to be something abstract from the meeting and instead regularly returns to internal conversations. And that greatly helps building the customer-centric culture. A very common mistake is many internal newsletters resemble a report but a mini version. It has too much text, too many KPIs, too many charts, and too much complexity. And just what happens? Well, nobody ends up reading them really. A very good practice would be to always include one main KPI, one trend, one verbatim, one strength, one priority or alert, and one action of the month. Second major function is reinforcing positive behaviors. This one is very important actually because many communications only talk about the problems, downtime, the errors, the alerts. But a newsletter is actually a very good opportunity to reorganize teams, to share best practices, to show improvements, and just in general reinforce some positive dynamics. Next one is infographic. These are probably one of the most misunderstood formats for presenting results, at least in my experience, because we often see dashboards that look like infographics or infographics full of KPIs and interactive charts as if they were dashboards. And although both formats are very visual, that is true, they don't have the same function. A dashboard is used, as I mentioned, to track, to explore, to compare, and to monitor. And an infographic is used to communicate a very clear and quick message. The key question should be, what do we want the person to remember after seeing it? Therefore, the less information usually works better. And here, a visual hierarchy is just fundamental. Verbatim is very important here because what they do is they help to build credibility, they help to humanize and emotionally connect. For example, I feel like my issues are being resolved quickly has, and quote unquote, of course, has a much greater visual and emotional impact than just a short sentence that there is plus 12 points in support satisfaction. Okay, actually, this is almost it. I'm going pretty fast. To conclude the webinar, I want to summarize. When choosing the right deliverables for each audience interested in the study's results, we must ask ourselves the three key questions. Let's review them here. First, we need to fully understand the expectations of each target audience. Are we aiming to optimize the customer experience or to enhance the company strategy? Second one is we also need to consider the specific audiences that we're targeting At times, it can be very useful to combine different deliverables to effectively cater to the chosen audience. And lastly, we keep in mind whether our goal is to explore, to decide, to monitor, or to inform. Here I will end. I hope it was useful. Thank you so much for attending today. And if you have any follow-up questions, again, there's the chat, but also just don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always very open and happy to help. And